Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And today I'm really excited to have Forrest Durr. He is the COO and integrator for Sexton Lawn and Landscape, as well as a couple other companies that the owner has. So Forrest, we're going to learn a little bit about what an integrator does. What is a COO integrator for those who may not be familiar with EOS and that terminology. And we're going to talk people and process. So excited to have you today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So the first question I always like to ask guests, why do you do what you do? I see you very active on LinkedIn. You're always promoting this concept of an integrator. Why are you so excited or, upbeat about this role and what it means?
Yeah, I think the reason I'm so excited is because it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I would say I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. I'll say that at this point in my life. But, several years ago, I had started a business, a small business, grew it a little bit, sold it. Didn't really like the concept or the process of owning a business. That just was not my thing, even though I had the idea, built the business out. But when I found the concept of traction and EOS and found the role of integrator, that's really where my interests lie, and where I've realized that that's what I want to do. That's where I find success. And I was able to look back at history and see over time that I was a closet integrator. And I tell everybody that, and they're like, "What? A closet integrator? What's that?" I really look back and I say I was an integrator before I knew what an integrator was. And when I talk to people across the country, which I talk to a lot of integrators across the country, many of them have the same story. I found my people. I found who I am. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. I really want to help other closet integrators realize their potential and figure out what they want to do with their lives.
I love it. And I think one of the things when I first got to know you, you were in a different company, a whole different industry.
Yeah.
And now you're in the lawn and landscape industry and dabbling in some other ones with the same
Sure.
owner.
Yeah.
What is it about the role of integrator that makes it so transferable, that makes the
Yeah.
skill set transferable, that makes makes the role really transferable between industries?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's interesting. I get that a lot. I still have people. I've been gone for the telecom industry for 9 months, and I still have people reach out on me on LinkedIn, going, "What are you thinking? Why did you leave a telecom company where it was successful and move over to landscaping? What creates a decision process like that?" And really, it boils down to, it's not about the industry. It's really about the people, process, and structure. And I know you like the word process, so I'll emphasize that: people, process, and structure. And it doesn't matter what the business is, you still have to have good people, you have to have good process, and you have to have good structure. And EOS creates that framework. So in the telecom space, I was in the telecom space and the SaaS space. We had two businesses where we were doing both of those things. And then I totally transitioned and came over to Sexton Lawn and Landscape. Now I'm in the landscape space. We have a jiu-jitsu gym, we have a CrossFit gym, we have some commercial real estate. And so it's really interesting to see how those skills transfer.
Yeah.
Most people that saw me when I first came into this company thought I was a spy or some kind of crazy person. What are you doing? I was a fixer. I was a hatchet man. There was a lot of rumors that went around. But the process of going in and asking people questions and learning about the business and then offering suggestions on how to improve the business and how it worked, that's what really intrigued me. And that's what's unique about being an integrator, is you can look at the business from different perspectives.
Yeah. So what is your role? What is the role of an integrator for people who maybe aren't familiar with EOS that much?
Yeah.
What is the role of an integrator? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's really a second in command is what a lot of people think of. So COO, second in command, could be a president. It just depends on what the company does as far as titles are concerned. But in the EOS space, there's two seats in the company. There's the visionary, who's typically the business owner. He or she's the person that comes up with the ideas and comes up with the vision and bootstraps the business and grows it. And then the integrator role is really where I sit, and that is I support the visionary. I'm second in command. I'm okay with being second because I like it when other people take risks and then I can help them grow their business over time. I get financially rewarded in that process, which is good. But what's interesting is that this VI relationship, this visionary integrator relationship, has been around for years. There are countless examples. You look at Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They weren't doing EOS because EOS wasn't a thing, but Steve Jobs was the visionary. Steve Wozniak was the integrator.
That's right.
You look at Warren Buffett, Charlie
And
Munger.
Charlie Munger. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, Charlie Munger just died just recently, and it was a big loss to Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett is the visionary, and there's been lots of interviews where he's talked about how much he leaned on Charlie Munger to kind of crystallize and build strategy and structure and processes to help his businesses grow. So hopefully that explains it, but
Yeah.
it's really that second in command. It's the guy, the
Yeah.
person that takes the vision and executes the vision.
Yeah. And I think the self-awareness that it sounds like that you've had around not wanting to be a risk taker, not wanting to, and it's not that you don't want to take any risk, but you don't want to be that person who's out there putting everything on the line to say, all right, I'm going to be this person. That self-awareness of this is the role that I love. There's like that's a really powerful thing as we grow and mature and realize what is it that I really love to do? What is it that I want to do? And what is it that my skill set enables to be very effective with? So I think that's incredibly powerful, that self-awareness that you shared there.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And like I said, everybody I've talked to that is a true integrator, they have the same reaction. I was an integrator before I knew what one was. I was a closet integrator. I knew I loved details. I knew I loved process and structure and organization, but I did not put a name on it. And that's just the reality that a lot of people face when they come to the realization that that's what they are.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And so we've talked a little bit about it. We touched on it a little bit here, the people and process and structure piece. So what are some of I often talk about people without process get frustrated and
Hmm.
process without people is wasted. You've
Hmm.
got to have both of these linked together. So if
Right.
you think about, people without process, and it doesn't have to be at your current company or something like that,
Sure.
but if
Yeah.
you think about in your past, people without process getting frustrated, what are some things that you've learned about trying to recruit in a good person who maybe doesn't have a process or doesn't have the right structure to operate in? What is that? What sort of happens in those situations? Do you have any examples or any insights on that?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that you get inconsistency when you don't have processes. And, there's a lot of companies that are smaller and growing and they're bootstrapping their business and they're basically hiring whoever they can hire to put butts in seats, bodies in seats, whatever you want to call it. And there's not a lot of organization or thought process in how to make sure that that client gets a consistent experience. And so there's the challenge is as you're growing, you're really just, putting your fingers in the hole in the dam and just trying to keep things afloat, right? And so building out as the business grows, you've got to start taking the discipline to step back and work on the business instead of working in the business and really frame out what that proven process is. What does that client journey look like? And the value that I've seen is organizations that look at the client journey from the client's perspective, not from the business perspective, and then build their processes around that so that everybody can be consistent. You look at companies like Chick-fil-A, they have a proven process. They are very consistent. They are very successful with that. So you look at any business that is very successful, they have developed proven processes. They hold people accountable to those processes and make sure everybody understands them.
Yeah, yeah. So sort of the corollary, right? So that was the people without process get frustrated, it causes inconsistencies, all these type of things. Sort of the corollary to that is that processes without people get wasted. Have you ever had
Mhm.
situations or have you ever seen situations where a great process, right? A
Mhm.
theoretical great process is like, this is the perfect process if only everybody would follow it, if only
Yeah,
everybody would do what's like you can see a process, but people aren't following it. What's the
yeah.
challenge around that side of it?
I think the challenge that I've seen around that is you can have a really, really great process, but it may be too complicated, maybe too many steps. And so you cannot. I was having a meeting yesterday with a group of EOS leaders. And one of the things we were talking about is defining those core processes. And I asked a question. I said, there were 20 people in the room. I said, how many people have a process binder or a process document? Everybody raised their hand. I said, well, how many pages is in your, 256 or 57 or 100? I'm like, okay, how many people have ever read the whole process document? And nobody raised their hand. I said, that's the problem. You've got to simplify these processes. You can't have the processes documented all the way down to where you hit function key F3 two times and hit escape twice. It's really simplistic. What are the 5 steps that get you 80% of the results? That's where you got to get down to. So that's where I've seen processes that are really good processes, but they're not easily trained. So.
Yeah. If you add in too much complexity or too many pages, and you use the word binder, right? We don't see as many binders these days as we used to. But I'll never forget. I was in a packaging company in Texas one time, and there was a newer employee and or other more experienced employees, and somebody told the newer employees like, well, that's in the process documents. He said, what am I supposed to do with that binder? He said, I put it in the bottom of my locker. And I've never had time to sit down and read it. Like, I don't, where the frustration of, you can make an incredibly long, incredibly detailed process, but if you don't train people on it and you don't, like, you've got to simplify it to the level where you're actually going to train people to. Otherwise it's useless, right? It just kind of gets wasted. So,
So you can make some really cool flow charts and diagrams and Venn diagrams and all these kinds of things. But if people can't understand it and they can't be able to learn it and live it, it's just not going to work. So
that's right. That's right. As simple as possible, but no simpler, right? That's the and one other thing that I've experienced is working with folks who want to change a process, who want to streamline something, but then there's all this resistance to it that, lots of people have excuses about why we can't change it or why I think we can't change it or why I think management won't let us change it or whatever. How do you overcome some of these change management, this resistance to change management?
I think that's one of the areas that EOS comes into play. And I think we mentioned earlier, Entrepreneurial Operating System, that EOS framework. If you're implementing EOS, then you have what's called a VTO, which is guiding where the business is going. And with that framework, everything needs to support that. And so if everybody's on the same page, they know where the company's going, then we're doing it because that's the way we've always done it goes away. You got to get rid of that mindset of that's the way we've always done it and focus on what is the best way to get this done, the most efficient way to get this done so that we can reach the goals, the sales targets, the customer acquisition rate, whatever that is. And that's, I think, the power in getting people on the same page and helping them think outside of the box of we've always done it this way. We've been very deliberate about getting rid of that terminology in our office. We've always done it that way. I don't want to hear that anymore. Tell me what we can do differently. Tell me what is the best way to do this. And
People used to mow lawns with real mowers and didn't have didn't have gas power, didn't have electric, didn't have whatever. Just because they used to do that, is that the way we still should do it today? Right?
Exactly.
So when we think about those technological advancements or process improvements or new things like that, you got to push some of that. So you got that VTO, that vision traction organizer, and that helps rally everyone around a common purpose, right? A common vision of where are we going and why are we trying to get there? So, and how often does your organization typically look at that VTO and refer back to it?
Great question. So in EOS, it's a 90-day world. So you look at it every quarter. So the process is the leadership team lays out that 2-page VTO. It's 2 pages, but it's 2 big pages of where the business is going. It's the 5-year plan, the core values, the core focus, the 3-year plan, 1-year plan, 90-day plan, et cetera. And the purpose is you look at it every quarter to make sure that you're still on track with where you want to go. And quarterly, you can make adjustments on that VTO. But if you review it quarterly, everybody can pay attention to something a quarter. You recap and make sure everybody understands that that's what the vision, and quarterly is the way to go.
Yeah, I love it. So how often do you review your processes to, I know in EOS, they say, get your process documented and followed
Yep,
by all. How
correct.
often are you reviewing those or going back to those or refining those to make sure that they're supporting the vision?
Yeah. Definitely have to review them if something's changing in the business. So if you make an adjustment on that VTO that's fundamental to a process, need to go back and revisit them. As a practice, we review them on an annual basis. So at our annual meeting, basically every year we have a 2-day meeting where the leadership team goes offsite and works on the business offsite. That's a time when you want to scan through those score processes and just see if anything might have adjusted, see if there's a difference in the VTO that would impact a core process. Obviously, you can change them at any time. Something may change, new equipment or different people or whatever. You may have to make some adjustments, but at least annually.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as long as you're keeping them at a higher level where you're looking at the core structure, the core process, and not getting into the details of, hit shift F7 3 times.
Right, right.
When you at that level, you can review them much easier on an annual basis. But if you start trying to get into, well, we're going to do all these things and check every detail, it becomes a really challenging thing to do, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you should really have, 5 to 7 core process, your finance process, your operations, your customer service, your HR process. Just what are those core processes? Again, what are the things what's the 20% that that your business does that gets 80% of the results? So
Yeah, yeah. So how do you store your processes today? I think this is something we kind of chatted about earlier, but
yeah,
you're not using probably a binder.
yeah,
Maybe you have some binders, you got people on the field or whatever, but
yeah.
how do you store them today? How do you keep them organized?
Yeah, so the way we keep the core processes organized is we use a software called 90, which is a software that you can use to manage EOS. It manages all your meetings and your rocks and your quarterlies, et cetera. But there's a process component where you can actually document those processes. You can put them in outline format. You can attach a diagram if you want to attach a diagram, but it makes it easy to where everything is in one place. The accountability chart's there so that the processes align with each role and responsibility. So that's where we keep them, is in that software.
Awesome, awesome. And I think it's one of the really core things. Organizations that I see that do EOS well, they actually do it, and they
Hmm.
actually do the all the pieces of traction. They look at their
Yeah.
data, they look at their getting their processes documented and follow well. They look at the right people in the right seats. And that's
Yes.
sometimes
Huge.
really, really hard, especially
Yeah.
for family businesses, maybe
Yeah.
second generation, third generation. This person's been here forever. This is the
Yep.
role they're in. How would you recommend people deal with some of those types of challenges that might exist?
I think that's a whole nother podcast episode. But yeah, I mean, right person, right seat is huge. You've got to make sure that you've got people that align with your core values, align with your culture. And even if you've got a high performer, we were talking about this yesterday in another group I was in, guy was telling me he had a really high performing salesperson, but he was a cancer to the organization.
Yeah.
And while he was bringing in sales, he was a cancer and he was driving people away. And what happens is when you've got that, and every business has to deal with it at some point, when you've got that, you've got to deal with it and you have to deal with it swiftly to get that person out of the business. And usually what happens, there's a sigh of relief from everybody that's been working around them going,
Yeah.
man, I'm glad somebody finally saw that this person needed to go.
Yeah.
But right person, right seat, they got to align with the culture. But then on the right seat side, you really got to make sure that it's the right person in the seat. Is it the right seat for them? You may have somebody that's in a seat that they're ill-equipped for. They don't have the capacity to do. They don't have the full understanding of the seat. Those are changes you need to make in your organization as well.
Yeah. Well, and I bring it up. I do appreciate it. Like, that could be a whole podcast or series of podcasts on its own, getting the right people in the right seat. But one of the things I learned about process, even
Mhm.
though I, am passionate about process, one of the things I learned is that process is only useful when it enables people to perform and do something that fulfills the purpose of their organization. So,
Right.
so we just can't look at process in isolation and say, oh, well, we've got the right process, so it
Right.
should just work.
Yeah.
that's not the way it works, right? We've got to
Right.
have people engaged, and you got to have the right people in the right seats to perform and fulfill that purpose. And I love the vision traction organizer. Like you can sort of see all of it
Yeah.
flowing down there. So
Yeah, and it makes sure that everybody's aligned with the vision, because you may have somebody that is a good employee. They may be a culture fit, but the vision has changed and they don't support the vision.
yeah,
They can't passionately get behind that vision. And again, those are people that you need to probably remove your business. So
yeah. What wisdom would you give folks who are working on their processes and working on documenting, streamlining, improving? What's some advice you would give them if they're starting down that journey or if they're struggling with that journey?
yeah, I think that there's a process or a process. There is a way you can go through a three-step process document or EOS. You can download it on EOS worldwide, and that three-step process documenter allows you to simplify your processes and just get down to the bare bones. You don't, again, want to have hundreds of pages of documents. Just start small. And I tell everybody I have run a EOS networking group, and I tell everybody in here, you're going to suck at it when you start. It's going to be horrible, but you will get better. It's like riding a bike. You were horrible when you first started riding a bike. You were falling all the time. You skinned your knees, but after you got to ride your bike better, you're going to get better at it. So processes, my best advice is you got to start high level. Get that 80-20 done, get the 20% that gets 80% of the results, and make sure you keep it simple. Don't get too complex, or you'll have paralysis by analysis if you try to make it too complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of organizations that go down this path of trying to create these very detailed SOPs
Hmm.
before they even get some type of framework. You've got to
Yeah,
start with a framework, and that IDS, or IDP, I think it is the
yeah,
one for the three-step documenter in
yeah,
EOS, right?
yeah,
Getting a common framework that you can look at your seven, 5 to 7 sort of core. These are the functions of our business. If you don't have that organized, then you probably have no business going and creating detailed SOPs, because people won't follow them. They won't
yeah.
know, where am I going to find them, where they stored all these things. So that's a great advice. I
Yeah, it's
appreciate
kind
it.
of like trying to make a 1-year plan without making a 5-year plan first. How do you know where you want to be in 5 years so you know what you need to do in 1 year? Same
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah. Great point. So listen, if folks in our audience are interested in learning more about this integrator role, learning more
yeah.
about what it is that you're so passionate about, can they follow you on LinkedIn? How do they get in touch with you, or how do they learn more?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Forrest, Forrest. Last name's Durr, Derr. I think there's one other person on LinkedIn with my name. I think it's a college student out of Illinois somewhere. So I should be easy to find. But just search me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of content on EOS and the integrator role, and happy to connect and have a phone call if you guys want to have a conversation too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode of Optics in Action. I appreciate it, Forrest.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey there, my name is Ryan Weiss, and I am the host of the Optics in Action podcast, where we spotlight visionary leaders who bring clarity and innovation to their industries. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you know someone who would be, you can find more information about the podcast and listen to previous episodes at opticsinaction.com. We'd be thrilled to have you on the show and can't wait to hear your story.